Good morning, 6th grade students. Today I'm going to be teaching you Fantasy Writing Lesson 6. We're going to be focusing on Story Mountains and the hero's journey. So before we even get into it and start learning about how to build a story mountain and think about the way we want to structure our stories, I first want to show you a video. Now, I believe that you would have seen this earlier in our unit. We're going to re-watch it because I think it's really relevant for what you're going to be working on today. So, let's watch. As we watch, I would like for you to be thinking about what a hero goes through during a fantasy story.
What do Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, and Frodo all have in common with the heroes of ancient myths? What if I told you they are all variants of the same hero? Do you believe that? Joseph Campbell did. He studied myths from all over the world and published a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, retelling dozens of stories and explaining how each represents the monomyth or hero's journey. So, what is the hero's journey? Think of it as a cycle. The journey begins and ends in the hero's ordinary world, but the quest passes through an unfamiliar, special world. Along the way, there are some key events. Think about your favorite book or movie. Does it follow this pattern? Status quo, that's where we start. 1 o'clock, call to adventure. The hero receives a mysterious message, an invitation, a challenge. 2 o'clock, assistance. The hero needs some help, probably from someone older, wiser. 3 o'clock, departure. The hero crosses the threshold from his normal, safe home and enters the special world and adventure. We're not in Kansas anymore. 4 o'clock, trials. Being a hero is hard work. Our hero solves a riddle, slays a monster, escapes from a trap. 5 o'clock, approach. It's time to face the biggest ordeal, the hero's worst fear. 6 o'clock, crisis. This is the hero's darkest hour. He faces death and possibly even dies, only to be reborn. 7 o'clock, treasure. As a result, the hero claims some treasure, special recognition, or power. 8 o'clock, result. This can vary between stories. Do the monsters bow down before the hero, or do they chase him as he flees from the special world? 9 o'clock, return. After all that adventure, the hero returns to his ordinary world. 10 o'clock, new life. This quest has changed the hero. He has outgrown his old life. 11 o'clock, resolution. All the tangled plot lines get straightened out. 12 o'clock, status quo, but upgraded to a new level. Nothing is quite the same once you're a hero. Many popular books and movies follow this ancient formula pretty closely. But let's see how well The Hunger Games fits the hero's journey template. When does Katniss Everdeen hear a call to adventure that gets the story moving? When her sister's name is called from the lottery. How about assistance? Is anyone going to help her on her adventure? Hey, Mitch. What about departure? Does she leave her ordinary world? She gets on a train to the capital. Okay, so you get the idea. What do you have in common with Harry Potter, Katniss Everdeen, and Frodo? Well, you're human, just like them. The hero's journey myth exists in all human cultures and keeps getting updated because we humans reflect on our world through symbolic stories of our own lives. You leave your comfort zone, have an experience that transforms you, and then you recover and do it again. You don't literally slay dragons or fight Voldemort, but you face problems just as scary. Joseph Campbell said, "In the cave you fear to enter lies the treasure you seek." What is the symbolic cave you fear to enter? Auditions for the school play? Baseball tryouts? Love? Watch for this formula in books, movies, and TV shows you come across. You will certainly see it again, but also be sensitive to it in your own life. Listen for your call to adventure. Accept the challenge. Conquer your fear and claim the treasure you seek. And then do it all over again.
All right, so Now that we've watched the hero's journey, I want us to apply that to Story Mountains. So before we even look at Story Mountains and the hero's journey, I want us to think about why we use them. The reason why we use Story Mountains is because they help us to plan our story. So they make sure we have all of the important parts to keep our story interesting. If we were to skip some parts like the rising action or the resolution, those are probably some terms that you remember from 5th grade, then our stories wouldn't be as interesting and satisfying for our reader. So Story Mountains are really important to make sure we get all of the parts of the story that we want. So it's very important for us to remember that our heroes are on our hero's journey. So the first step is that they are called on an adventure. Something happens where they learn about something new in another world, and it's their time to go on a quest. Then they leave the normal world and enter the fantasy world. That's what they meant by threshold. So it's something is happening where they are going into a new place. In Harry Potter, when Harry leaves with Hagrid and he goes to Diagon Alley, that's his crossing the threshold. Then, before we get to the conflict, the biggest conflict in your story, they experience some challenges. So maybe they're trying to learn how to harness their powers. Maybe they are figuring out who is their mentor. They're learning how to live in this new world. So there's some challenges they have to face before we get to the larger conflict. After the conflict, they have changed for the better. So they experience this conflict, and afterwards they're like a newer version of themselves. So they've learned a little bit more your character. They are more powerful than they were before and more strong than they were before. And they're ready to take on a whole new challenge if you were to choose to write a sequel to your story. So now that we know what the hero's journey is like, we're going to look at a story mountain. So we're going to go through what every part of the story mountain would look like. So the first box would be your beginning, which is when you start in the normal world and something happens that introduces us to the new world. The second step would be meeting a mentor and sidekicks. So who is going to be helping your character along through all the challenges that they're going to face? The third step, this is when they face those small challenges, right? If they have powers, they're starting to learn how to use them. They're starting to understand the problem in their story, and they're facing some small challenges. So maybe they have to go on a quest and find 3 things in order to beat their villain. Maybe they need to go to a new world and convince someone to join them in order to fight their villain. That's when that happens. This is in your rising action. The rising action is what happens right before the conflict. So you're setting it up for your reader. You don't want to just have a big battle where we don't know why it's happening. Then you have your conflict, your character's biggest challenge. This could be a fight with the villain, a fight with a monster, having to go to another new place to find something, the biggest challenge in your story. Your falling action happens next, which is what happens after the big conflict. So if they won, then what? What do? How do they get back home? Who are they with? Who has survived? Who has not? And then, towards the end, your character returns to normal as much as they can, and they've changed for the better. You want to show that your character has learned something and that they've changed throughout the process of your story. So if you decide you don't want to use a story mountain, you can also storyboard. So you'll see I took all the boxes and I added it to a storyboard. So each part I'm describing like what you would have happen in that box. So this would be the beginning. And then you would write your scene. You would maybe say like intro. Your character realizes they are special. And then you write the scene. 2, they meet mentor and sidekicks. And then you write the scene, right? You would have to describe in each box what is happening that meets that criteria. So my character, Tessa, for example. Tessa goes to the New York City deli and spots some fairies. And then I would write my scene. Next, Tessa meets her sidekick, and the sidekick is going to tell them, or the mentor is going to tell her, all about this new fantasy world. And then I would write my scene. This is another version of a story mountain, depending on what you find to be the most helpful. So I really wanted to show you how to use these diagrams and how to follow the hero's journey. In your boxes, you shouldn't be writing what is happening. You should be writing what is happening in your story, not what I have. So to reiterate, you're not writing beginning, meet mentor and sidekicks, harness powers. That's for me to show you how the hero's journey works. You should be writing, my character meets so-and-so. My character meets their sidekick blank. My character learns they have magic powers and has to go fight Medusa. My character is preparing for the big battle by, right? You're not writing this out exactly as it is. You're writing your version of it for your story. So here's another example Story Mountain. If you were to use Story Mountain that I did for my story. At the beginning, my character Tessa, she's in the deli. She freaks out. She sees there's fairies. She meets the fairy warrior Imogen, who's going to be like her mentor. She learns how to be a fairy, a warrior fairy, and she learns about the battle between the warrior fairies and the warlocks. She learns the warlock leader, this is my rising action, is her father, and she's debating on whether or not she should fight. Then we have the big conflict where Tessa and the fairies fight the warlocks for control of the world. My falling action, the fairies win, but Tessa's father disappears into hiding. So then Tess goes home knowing that she's going to forever be on a hunt to look for her father. This is an example of what your story mountain could look like. So today, you have two options. You can either, let's zoom in a little bit. You can either fill out your own version of a story mountain, which is what I did. I prefer Story Mountain. Or you can use a storyboard. So you would be writing, oh, I did not mean to do that. You would be writing what happens in your intro. Tessa sees the fairies. And you would write it. Tessa meets mentor fairy Imogen. You would write it. So those are your options for today. You can either do a story mountain or a storyboard, depending on what is going to help you the most to organize your story. Remember, it's so important that you're storyboarding because tomorrow we're going to flash draft. And if you haven't done your storyboard, then flash drafting is going to be very difficult for you. So as you're writing your storyboard, I want you to be thinking about what stages your hero is going through, your main character, who they're meeting along the way, what challenges they're facing, and how they resolve it and become a better person. Please let us know if you have any questions. This was a long lesson, but very important for you to understand the hero's journey before you start storyboarding. So good luck, fantasy writers. Please let us know if you need anything at all, and we can't wait to see your stories.